Class 6 Biology Chapter 2 The Flower. Children, in this video you will learn about the different types of flowers, the functions of the flower, pollination and agents of pollination. Types of flowers. If all the four whorls, that is the calyx, corolla, androecium and gynoecium are present in the same flower, then it is called as a complete flower or a bisexual flower. For example, the China rose. As you can see over here, a China rose has all the four whorls. You can see the calyx, the corolla that is present over here, the androecium, the yellowish part that you see over here, and on top of it the gynoecium, which enters inside up to the ovary. So a China rose is an example of a complete flower or a bisexual flower. That is, the androecium and the gynoecium both are present in it. If any one of the whorls is missing in a flower, then it is said to be an incomplete flower. Like if the calyx or the corolla or the androecium or the gynoecium, if any one of these is absent in a flower, then we call that flower as an incomplete flower. See the example of bougainvillea. You have seen the bougainvillea plants around you many a times. You have seen brightly pink colored petals or orange colored or white colored petals of the bougainvillea. But do you know that these are not the petals of the bougainvillea flower? They are bracts. We do not call them as petals. They are not petals. So, in the bougainvillea plant, the flowers do not have any corolla. That is, they do not have any petals. What we see are the bracts. And inside the bracts, you will find the androecium, gynoecium is present. In some plants, the flowers either have the androecium or the gynoecium. Then these type of flowers are called unisexual flowers. See the example over here. This is a pumpkin flower that you see. Now this pumpkin flower you will find in two variants. One, you will see that the ovary is present. That is the green colored part that you see over here is the ovary. This is present in one flower, and in the other flower you will find only the androecium is present. So the pumpkin flowers that you see, they are unisexual flowers. One variant has the ovary and the other variant has the androecium part. So here you have learnt about the three different types of flowers. Functions of a flower. The flower is the reproductive part of the plant, as it consists of the androecium and the gynoecium. Its main function is to produce fruits and seeds. That is, it's a long process. When a flower blooms, all the different parts starts functioning. The corolla is brightly in color. It has a sweet fragrance to attract the insects. Although along with this fragrance, you will find nectar, which is a sweet liquid which is present at the bottom or the base of the petals. Now insects come near these flowers to take the pollen grains as well as the sweet nectar. So when these pollen grains get transferred from the anther of the flower to the stigma, they fertilize the ovules and these ovules becomes the seeds. As such, the ovary ripens and then becomes the fruit. So as you can see, the function of the flower is to produce fruits and seeds. Let us learn about pollination. What do you mean by pollination? Pollination is the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of a flower. So, it can happen in one single flower or between different flowers. Let us learn about the different types of pollination. Basically, there are two types of pollination: self-pollination and cross-pollination. Here, as you can see in this figure, self-pollination is occurring in this flower. As you can see, the pollen grains are present over here on top on the anther part. Now, the pistil, as you see over here, has the stigma. Now, the pollen grains from these anther, they come over on this pistil, and then pollination occurs. So, in self-pollination, it can occur in a single flower or between the flowers of the same plant. So, when pollination is occurring in one plant, that is, if you take a hibiscus plant or a shoe flower plant, you will find there are different flowers on this plant of the same color and of the same species. So, what is happening in that plant? The one flower, if you take, it can self-pollinate itself. Self-pollination can occur over there. Apart from that, pollen grains of one flower can transfer to the pollen grains or to the stigma of another flower. Now, this flower has to be present in the same plant. As you can see in this figure, this plant has two flowers. Now, once self-pollination is occurring in one single flower, where the anther ruptures, the pollen grains come out and is transferred on the stigma. This is part A that you see. Now in the part B, you can see that the anther of one flower is rupturing and the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma of the next flower which is present in the same plant. So this is also self-pollination. We can call this also as self-pollination. So self-pollination occurs in a single flower or between flowers of the same plant. Cross-pollination. Now, cross-pollination occurs in flowers which are present on different plants but of the same kind. Now, if you think that a rose plant and a hibiscus plant can cross-pollinate itself, then you are wrong. Cross-pollination can occur only between flowers of the same species. That is, cross-pollination can occur only in hibiscus plants or only in rose plants. Maybe the flowers are from different plants, but then cross-pollination can occur with the help of certain agents. So, cross-pollination occurs in flowers on different plants but of the same kind. Here the pollen grains are transferred from the anther of one flower to the stigma of another flower on another plant of the same kind. Agents of pollination. For cross-pollination to occur, an agent must be available to transfer the pollen grains. So, to transfer the pollen grains from one flower to the other flower, we need certain agents. So, we call them as the pollinating agents. So, there are four common agents. First, the insects. As you can see in the first figure, that the insects are helping in cross-pollination. They go to one flower to take the nectar. So, when their body touches the anther, what happens? The pollen grains stick to the leg or to the body of the bee over here. Now this bee flies off to another flower to collect nectar. What is happening here is that the pollen grains which the insect is carrying in the legs as well as the body is now transferred to the stigma of the other flower which is present in another plant. So here in this way cross-pollination occurs and the bee here becomes the agent of pollination. So here the insects are helping in the agent of pollination. Next, the wind. The wind also helps in pollinating. How? Some plants like the maize or the palm or the pine, they produce dry pollen in large quantities. So when the flowers of these plants mature, the pollen grains are blown away by the wind. As you can see in the maize, when the hair-like structures which are coming out of the flower, so these carry pollen grains. They have pollen grains in them and they are dry. So these pollen grains are blown away by the wind and might fall on another flower of another plant. In this way, cross pollination occurs in maize. So, these pollen grains may fall on the feathery stigma of a flower of the same type. Then pollination occurs. And such type of pollination, when is carried out by the wind, is known as wind pollination. Another agent of pollination is water. Now, the kind of pollination here, water acts as an agent to transfer the pollen. So, one example that you will see over here is the flower Vallisneria. Now, in this figure, as you can see, there are two Vallisneria plants. One is the male plant and the other is the female plant. The male plant produces the stamen over here. Now, this stamen is released underneath the water, but they come up on the surface of the water. But as the female plant, you can see over here, produces flowers. Now, these flowers come up on the surface of the water. When these stamens, they come out, they rupture and the pollen grain starts flowing along with the water and may fall on the flower over here. So, the stigma which is present in the flowers accepts the pollen grains and as such pollination occurs. So here you can see that water helps in pollinating. In the second figure, as you can see over here, there are different types of animals which help in the pollination, like the hummingbird which you see over here or a bat. Like when these hummingbird or the bat, they visit flowers. Now hummingbirds, they take the nectar from the flowers. So they put their beak into the flower to collect the nectar. Their beak are long. So when they are drinking nectar from one flower, certain pollen might fall on their beak. They fly off to another flower and they try to take the nectar from that flower. So what happens? The pollen grain which is stuck on the beak can now fall on the stigma of the other flower, and as such pollination occurs. Even the bats also help in the same way. So children, read the part which is given in the book for agents of pollination and try to understand all these parts. We will discuss about fertilization and the different types of fruits tomorrow in the next video.